Well, it's Wednesday evening. This is the 1st of June. Welcome to the month of June. This is Golden Nugget, and it's the Q&A session. I've received some really interesting feedback over the last week. Some people thought that, wow, you're really kind of talking dire. Thank you for the links. And there's a lot of feedback that came back from Earl Nightingale's The Strangest Secret. I'm glad people are listening to it. And I encourage you, if you're not, please do that. And I also encourage you to subscribe, click on the bell so you get notifications when a new video is put up. I appreciate that. I got notification from a video tracking company today, 2 days ago, and they have informed me that I've had over 8,000 views. And I appreciate that. I'd like to have 8 million. But yeah, 8 million subscribers, 8 million views every time. That'd be amazing. That would be really great. I'm trying to give you some value in the world. That's really all that I'm really about at this point. So let's just talk a little bit about some of the feedback that I received this week. People were asking, I thought the goal was to get rich, or I thought the goal was to receive awards and accolades from other people. And so I just want to be very clear. Earl Nightingale defined success. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. So I just want to share with you 2 stories right now. The first story is in regards to a gentleman that I knew 25, 30 years ago. He had a small store. He had raised 8 children. All 8 children went to university. All 8 children graduated, most of them with advanced degrees. All of them were married, happily married. He had, a gaggle of grandchildren. Every time it came to the holidays where families would show up, in North America, it'd be Thanksgiving, Christmas, Mother's Day, those kind of things. His little house was just jam-packed with people. And, he was grandpa, his wife was grandma. Everybody loved this guy. He would go down the street, everybody would wave to him. He was just really well liked. But what kind of car did he drive? It was older. He never had a new model. He once told me, I've never bought a new car in my life. Interesting. He lived in a very small house. He raised 8 children in that small house. He told me, he said, thank goodness for bunk beds, because we could put a couple sets of bunk beds in each of the bedrooms and we could, take care of things. He was a very humble man, very, very nice gentleman. And he shared with me one day, he said, one of my middle boys is an accountant. And he's a certified public accountant. In the UK, that'd be like being a chartered accountant. And he said, my son came in and he said, Dad, how do you keep your books in the store? He says, his father says, I don't really keep books. He says, I know how much I bring in to stock the shelves. I know how much I have to pay out for that. I know how much the rent is and how much the electricity is. And all of this stuff I can write off. I know that that's not taxable. And he says, and then whatever's left is what I pay taxes on, and we as a family reside on it. And he said, but Dad, how are you ever going to get ahead? He says, I am ahead. He said, I've had 8 children. All of them have gone to university. All of them are successfully employed and engaged in the world right now. They all have their own homes. They have loving wives and families. Your mother and I, we go to bed every night grateful for how we've been blessed as a family. He says, I'm really a successful man. And you see, that's right. Because see, this man's worthy ideal was to have a family that was loving, united, and in his opinion, successful, meaning well-educated, well-employed, and being productive contributors to society. But if you looked at what he lived in, if you look what he drove to work to and from with, if you looked at how he and his wife dressed, they were extremely modest. Most things were from, 5, 6, 7 years ago when it might have been new for them, but they just believed in utilizing things until they wore out. They were no longer serviceable, and then they moved on. But you see, that's a story of somebody who was successful, but in the eyes of many, well, he wasn't rich. He didn't receive awards and accolades, which is true, he didn't. But he was a success because his worthy ideal was being met. Now, I want to tell you about another gentleman who, again, the world may not understand that he was successful. He had a small house. He had a small family of 4 children. All of his children went off to university. All of them became successful. But he never saw any of them graduate because he died before this. Now, I was a good friend of this gentleman. And he once told me while we're driving down the road, he says, I don't believe anybody would care if I were to die tonight. And I asked him, well, surely, your wife, your children. He said, yeah. He said, my parents, my wife, my children, yeah, they would care. But he says, but who else would come to my funeral? Who else would be there? See, success for him was who would show up. So let me tell you what happened. Tragically, about a 2-year period later, he was driving down the road one night. He was carrying petrol inside of his vehicle that he had just purchased so that he could put it into his lawn mowing machine so he could cut his grass, being that it was the springtime that was coming up. He had just said goodbye to his father at his office, said, I'll be stopping in to see you tomorrow, Dad. Thank you for loaning me the petrol can. He filled up the petrol can. He was driving to his house. Somebody swerved on the road. He swerved. He went off the road into a ditch, got pinned in underneath his vehicle, and the gas can in the back of his vehicle burst open. And apparently, whatever happened in the car just burst out into flame, and he was dead. The place where he worked, so many people put in to take time off to go to his funeral that the factory just shut down for the funeral. The church that he had his funeral service in had seating set up for 500 people. They took every chair that they had in their storage and folding chairs to bring out. They had seating out for 1,200 people in this church, and they still had people standing in the hallways to be there for his funeral. The funeral home or the burial place was 10 miles distance from the church. And the police notified the funeral organization that we still have vehicles leaving the vicinity of the church to join the funeral procession to go to the funeral. And they said, we anticipate that the last car will be an hour after this message got to them. And they said, if you have to proceed with the funeral service, as long as you've got the family, please do proceed. Everybody will pretty much understand, but you're going to have to do that. There was no place to park. This cemetery had rows and rows of cars parked on all the side roads and gravel roads and things around there. People were walking in, and the congregation that was there was just getting larger and larger and larger, and people couldn't hear any longer. They were just standing back. It looked like a rock concert was about to begin. There were so many people there to see and to offer respects to this man who thought nobody cared about him. See, success to him was that he made a contribution enough to people's lives that they would take time out of their life to respect his. See, success is defined however you want to define it, as long as it is you in pursuit of a worthy ideal. It's not money. It's not position. It's not power. Because you can have all those things and still feel bankrupt. That is what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. And that's my golden nugget for this evening. Please subscribe, please share, please do whatever you can to make this screencast grow. I hope it has been a benefit to you this evening. Over here in the UK, it's the Jubilee for Her Majesty the Queen, 70 years on the throne, longest reign of any monarch in, I guess, modern history. If you read the Bible, we had kings and queens that went for millennia. So please, I wish you all who are celebrating the Jubilee of Her Majesty Elizabeth Regina II a glorious weekend of celebration. And to the rest of you, enjoy June, a marvelous month. Thank you so much.